One.
Hi! Hello,
Hello.
everybody. Welcome to DnDTime Talks, a show where we discuss all things Dungeons and Dragons. I am Pete.
Jeremy. Pete, I made like a straight face at the camera because I was thinking to myself, you know what? I am not gonna be interrupted by Pete this time, and it worked.
Hi.
That's all I got.
I
Pete, how's
mean,
it
fair
going?
enough. I'm doing good. I am disheveled, as one is always pretty much disheveled when one begins a stream. In my experience, at least. Maybe that's not true for other streamers, but for me,
We are
I'm always
professional strembors.
yeah, for me, I'm always at least a little bit confused and discombobulated at the beginning of every stream. How about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. My cat is threatening to stomp all over my audio interface again. He's just hanging out right. Oh, no, he fell off. He's all right. He's gone. I'm doing okay. I can't complain. I got home a little early today. I got to
Yeah,
eat a little bit of dinner before I jumped on here, so it's a good thing.
it seems like you
And
massacred the bus monster today.
yeah, no, that buff monster got straight wrecked with like we're getting rid of the W, just REKT wreck.
Hells
Uh,
to the Y to the EA, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And hell's to the hi everybody, how you doing in
Hells
chat?
to the high to the HI high. Hi
Sure.
everybody. I see people hanging out. I see me, Sheba. See me, and Farful. Hello to everyone else that's chilling that I don't see currently in chat.
You lurkers.
I'm excited to talk about some D&D stuff with y'all. Uh,
As always. Yeah, I'm really excited about this one. Fixing mistakes or the retcon. Oh
the
boy.
art of the art of the retcon. So Jeremy,
Nice.
without further ado, would you like to bring us in?
No.
Okay, I'll do it then. Today we're going to be talking about fixing DM mistakes. We're going to be going over some of the most common mistakes that GMs make, whether or not one should consider them mistakes, how to correct those. And we're doing this because when a new player GMs, a lot of the times they have kind of this big fear of making mistakes, and that's something that I think stops people from GMing in a lot of places. I mean, I've heard that from a lot of people that they don't want to mess up, they don't think they'll be good at it, and really, you just got to dive right in and know that you're going to mess up a ton, and it's going to be fine, and you're going to work through it. And that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah. And for those unaware, retconning or retroactive continuity, as it kind
I
of
didn't
stands
know
for,
that.
yeah, retroactive continuity. The idea of it is going back to change something you have previously established or stated as fact in your game and changing that, right? Whether it be an event where like, oh, the party died. Let's say they didn't die. Or this tavern's on Square Street. Well, actually it's on Oval Street. That's retconning, going back and changing something you've established, just to lay a framework of what we're really talking about. Retcon's a word that people are very afraid of. Like it's like almost like they've demonized it, but
One
it's
of
not
those one of
that
those
bad a thing.
taboo four-letter words.
Yeah, there's a way to do it wrong, and there's a million ways to do it right. So just don't do it the way it's wrong, and you're good. Just do it any other way, and you're set. But before we even start talking about what needs to be changed and what needs to be retcon and fixed, let's start talking about, first of all, what doesn't need to be retconned, what doesn't need to be fixed, because there are certain things that just aren't mistakes. They might not quite be how you intended it, but they aren't wrong. So, for starters, as the dungeon master, you are the one who runs the world, right? You decide how mechanics of the game actually apply in your world. You decide what all the enemies think, how they act, all of that, what they say, all that good stuff. Um, and nothing is a mistake until you, well, say it's a mistake, right? Until you come out and say, "Yep, I made an error." Um, yeah, until something like that happens. As a DM, you're not obligated to let the players know when you do something that you didn't intend, um, because 90% of what you're doing is what you didn't intend as a DM. You're
Yeah.
improving, you're working on the spot. So it's that. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it's important that for the most part you don't say
Yes.
when you make a mistake or when you go off the rails of what you had planned, because you're doing it all the time, and that kind of illusion, right? The man behind the curtain that's what you're going for. Um, I'd say more often than not, it's actually really unhealthy and bad in as being a dungeon master if you call out your mistakes, especially at the end of like a hard fight. Don't be like, "Oh man, I screwed up and gave that monster extra damage." No, that's
No,
not a thing.
that
It's
was
not
just
a
what the
thing.
monster
And
was.
yeah, exactly. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute.
Yeah. And when you kind of create this air, and you don't let those things slip up, and you just kind of assume, even when behind the screen everything is burning down, and the world feels like it's on fire as you have no idea what's going on, your players most of the time will assume that you do. And it's nice for players to be able to have confidence in their GM. And it's important to like, because players will start to question your world if they start to question you as a GM. So make sure you kind of maintain that. And is kind of like a kind of a sad category to this. Um, Another thing that I wouldn't call a mistake is making a ruling. Even if you mess up rules in games, that's not necessarily a mistake. Well, technically, yes, you made a mistake, like you didn't know what the rules were. That's not something that you want to go back and change. I think we've talked about this a few
Yeah.
times, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But that's not the kind of thing we're talking about. If in the moment you need to make a snap ruling because you're not sure how something works and you want to keep the game flow rolling, that's the correct thing to do. You should
Yeah.
always do that. And then maybe later you find out that a character wouldn't have died because of that, be it an NPC or a player character, or some other massive event would not have occurred or would have occurred differently as a result of that ruling. That's fine. That's not a mistake. That was how you chose to rule it in the moment, and as the DM,
Yep.
you can do that. So that's not the kind of thing that you should be retconning and thinking about changing.
I don't know my player's handbook on hand, but if I did, I would hold it up right now and I would say the player's handbook and the dungeon master's guide, for that matter, are guides. That's why it's called the dungeon master's guide. The rules in there are guides. They aren't hard and fast. Whatever you do when you run your world, whatever snap judgments you make, that is correct. Not whatever some obscure page of the dungeon master's guide says. So keep that kind of stuff in mind when you're running. A lot of players will have may have kind of snapback about that, but in the end, you're running the game, and it's your responsibility to make calls that you feel appropriate. So
Absolutely.
we don't want to harp on this too much. So let's move on to what is an actual mistake, because there are actual big mistakes that happen.
Yes.
Uh,
Oh, for sure. Um, and
Ones that
as
aren't just simple, rulings or what have
yeah.
you.
And as a kind of just an overarching guideline for talking about these mistakes, what at least I personally, and I think you'll agree with me, Jeremy, the way I would define a mistake is something that happens in the game that has a negative impact on the fun of the group and the players at the table.
I agree. And I don't completely agree.
I don't think it's an end all, but
Yeah,
I
it's
think it's
not.
a
That's not a.
good rule of thumb.
It's not that everything that decreases enjoyment in the moment is a mistake. However,
This is
all
true.
mistakes decrease your enjoyment in the moment.
That's a good way of putting it. The old
Not all
squares and
square,
rectangles.
exactly. Not all rectangles are squares, but all squares are rectangles. All mistakes are going to make everyone at the table have less fun, and but not everything that makes people have less fun is a mistake. If a player character dies, that feels bad. That's not necessarily a mistake. It might be a mistake, but it might not. Before we jump right in and keep going here, I just want to point out amazing comment in the chat by Onyx Shiva. Everything can be exactly as you planned if you railroad them hard enough and take away all their fun. I actually don't mind being railroaded sometimes. I enjoy the railroad.
Yeah, it depends on my
Choo
mood
choo,
personally.
toot toot. I'm
Uh,
okay with the railroad sometimes.
how kind of how active of a player, like how tired I am, makes me depend very heavily on whether or not I want to be railroaded or not. Because if I'm kind of sleepy, a railroad sounds really great.
Just a nice, easy train down Dungeons
just
and Dragons Canyon.
just
Anyway,
oh, you want me to go kill the Lich King? Yeah, whatever, man. Just sure.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. Anyway, let's start talking about some of these big mistakes, because they come in a kind of three sets of categories. One is like story mistakes, another one is balance mistakes, and then there's everything else. Everything else is its own category, but
Yes.
story and balance are two separate. So, story mistake. this is the kind of deal where you've backed yourself into a corner with your plot, where you have established in the past that that there's only one way to do X, and the players need to do X, and because Y happened, X is now impossible, so they cannot go on. That is a story mistake. Maybe you have to talk to this one NPC because they're the only ones with the knowledge. Oh shit, you murdered them. What were you? You were supposed to not kill them, player characters. But the player characters are murder hobos and they kill them. This is like a very classic, especially the interrogate the NPC option. A super classic mistake. Happens all the time. You intend your players to interrogate the big bad and they just kill them all the time.
Oh yeah.
Now, what's interesting about this is we talked earlier, right, about it's not a mistake till you say it. Until you say the only person and the only way you can get that information is by interrogating this person, that's not the only way you can get it. Right?
Yes.
Until you've established that. So even then, it's not even a mistake unless you establish it beforehand.
You have told them. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they still kill them anyway. And then what do you do?
And so that's kind of that's kind of a fairly easy to correct story mistake where either and we'll talk more about the actual retconning a little bit later, but you just kind of paint yourself in this corner where you can't really retcon your way out, or you just move some things behind the screen to make it work for yourself. And what about kind of a more kind of intricate story mistake? So let's say that you have a plot setup where the players need to gain the 8 keys to battle, open the door of destiny, and fight the one true hero. And they've collected 3 keys, and that is no longer fun, collecting keys. They do not like collecting keys, but the entire crux of your game has been built around, well, go and collect all of these keys and go and fight this individual. So what do you do when you kind of put yourself into this, now you're in like a much bigger situation where the kind of whole of your game is riding on that? And the answer is the same thing, just bigger. You can either talk to your players and say, hey, this isn't really going that well. We can either sort of, maybe we can just kind of skip ahead and
you've collected all the keys now.
Yeah, you've collected all the keys now. You can go right ahead and go to the thing, and we'll continue kind of the game from that point. Maybe there's a moment where you could just behind the scenes shuffle, and in the next place where they collect the keys, oh, this one individual has already stolen all of the keys, and you have to go find this guy who's collected the keys. And now not only are you giving them the plot tokens, but you're sending them on a new direction where they're not doing the boring thing that they didn't like. Whatever you end up doing, don't let yourself continue a plot that isn't fun for you or your players because that you stated that it was the way that it was supposed to progress. Never let that happen.
Yep. And you see, at this point, we haven't even talked about retconning yet. We're simply course correcting. We're moving things forward so that you don't have to retcon, right? So that things just sort of work easier. Farfel in chat, why are they fighting the one true hero? Because they're murder hobos. They want to kill the one true hero.
I was thinking that they had to best them to prove themselves the one true hero.
I was saying they're evil.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I see that a lot, where they have to collect all the MacGuffins to do X, Y, or Z. And yeah, that can get old. That can get old. That can get tiresome. Sometimes it's just not even fun to begin with, especially if they're very puzzly dungeons, and you find out, wow, my group hates puzzles. Shit. And like people were saying, great way to do that is just to come out with another answer, right? Oh, this other person's collecting. Sometimes you dig yourself into a really bad hole, though, right? Sometimes we'll take that example. They have to collect all the keys in the dungeon. Yes, they have to collect all the keys in the dungeons, and they're the only ones that can enter the dungeons, and blah 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 blah, and blah blah blah, to the point where you've put so many
locks
requirements on it, that you can't add in another NPC to have come in and collected the rest of the keys, and then they have to get them from him or her or whoever, whatever. So you can't do that. Well, then what do you do? And this is an interesting thing because we start to talk about um, another strategy, and that is how do they know all this information? Usually, it's because an NPC told them. Right? Maybe a powerful wizard told them of the prophecy where only they could go into the dungeon and get the keys. And that powerful wizard was wrong. You, as a dungeon master, said it, but the dungeon master wasn't telling the players that. The NPC was telling the characters that, and that NPC was wrong. That is a very minor way of retconning because a player will almost always assume that what the dungeon master says to them, even if they're acting as an NPC, is infallible, is correct. That NPCs
Yes.
are incapable of lying, are incapable of having ulterior motives. And if they're your friends and they tell you something that it is true, why would they lie to you? And well, the answer is they just didn't know. Or maybe they were wrong. Maybe someone lied to them.
Hmm.
Um,
They had
so
uh,
that's the next kind of
unreliability
point.
as a narrator.
Yeah, the unreliable narrator. If you think that you've locked yourself into a corner, look at that and say, well, how have I done this? Was it through NPCs? Great, they were wrong. Done. Unreliable narrator, I'm out. A really, really small, simple retcon that every one of your players at the table will totally buy. Oh, shit, the wizard was just wrong. All right, yeah, I guess that makes sense. And that makes perfect continuity in your. People are wrong all the time in the real world. So
Sometimes, depending on how well it's done, it can actually increase believability in the
yeah,
story where people are like, yeah, I guess in the real world, people are wrong. And
yeah.
they'll be impressed that you thought of that kind of little nuance of detail.
So, even when you think you've backed yourself into a corner, more often than not, you're all good. And sometimes you fuck up even beyond that. And you've
Yeah.
locked yourself so hard into a corner that you can't get yourself out of it anyhow. And that's where we'll talk about hardcore retconning later.
Yes.
But
Just
there are
the
other kinds of
hard,
mistakes you can
fast.
make. Before we jump to that, let's talk about one of the other major categories of big mistakes.
Yeah.
Uh,
That would be, if you mind, if you don't mind.
Please,
Uh,
absolutely. I was handing it off to you. It was the
I could,
Olympic torch.
I've
Handed to
taken
Pete.
it and I'll run with it and I'll run
Sure.
directly to.
Are you supposed to
Uh,
catch it? I just threw it to you, Pete.
I'm gonna run directly to.
You
I
have a
caught it
catch?
just now. Well,
There
he
we
was
go.
flying all the way from California. Um,
Yeah, it's far.
uh, I'm going to get right onto the high bar with this Olympic torch because we're talking about balance. I feel pretty good about that one.
That
This
was
one's a little.
good. That was
Uh,
good.
this this one's a little bit trickier, and this kind of comes up where you have some discrepancy in maybe the power level of your world versus the power level of your players, and or the power level of one player versus the rest of your party, and some of them are a lot easier to fix than others. For example, the one that's probably the easiest to fix of those is if you have one player in the group that's weaker than everyone else. Well, as a DM, what you do in that situation is you just give them uh, a powerful magic item or some new boon or something that will put them more in line with everybody else. Um, but what about the opposite situation? One where, say, one character in the party is a significantly higher power level than everyone else. There's a couple of things you might think. Well, the first instinct is, I guess I could buff everyone else up, but then maybe you're going to throw your entire game out of balance, and that's a little bit of a ham-fisted way to deal with one kind of problem. And maybe sometimes that is the right way to deal with it, depending on how extreme it is. But now you're in a situation where the obvious answer would be to in some way lower their power level, but that's going to feel really bad for the individual that has to have, that really OP magic item that you took taken away or in some way kind of changed, or likewise where they kind of made a really min-maxy multi-class that's beating everyone else, and now you're telling them that they have to in some way change like the core of what their character is to make them more in line. That feels really bad for both you as a DM to have to do and the player to deal with. Um, so how do you deal with it? That is a good question, one that I don't think there's a perfect answer to.
Yeah.
And the first and most obvious answer is to communicate with that player about the problem, as is often our elixir solution here on D&D Time Talks. Open communication is so important in that kind of situation. Just bring it up to the player.
I mean, the first thing actually I think in that case is talk to every player individually first
Hmm.
and see how they feel about it. If you as a DM notice that, wow, Frank deals so much more damage with his paladin than Jill does with her, I don't know, conjuration wizard. Jill's got to feel real bad about that. And if you talk to Jill and Jill's like, "Oh no, I love that he just walks up and gets hit by everything. I can stand in the back and conjure my cool stuff." Great, there's not a problem. So that's like when you see one of these balance mistakes, and you think there's a party imbalance with your characters, talk to them first, right? Make sure that everyone actually feels that way. Because if everyone's super stoked because they all feel like they're filling the role of their characters,
Hmm.
even though they're not more powerful, not equally powerful, that's fine. There's not a problem. So first make sure there's a problem.
Yes, that's a great
Then
point.
you
Great
gotta
point.
talk to the player and be like, hey, this is a problem I've noticed. How can we work it out?
Mhm.
And a reasonable player um, will be like, "Oh, is it really a problem?" And you, as a dungeon master, can say, "Well, I've already talked to everyone, and yeah, it's really kind of
It's frustrating for
oppressing
other
their
players.
ability to play. They feel like they aren't as impactful, and it's something that does need to be addressed." And you just say that just like that in a really polite, meaningful way. And if and that's how you work things out. That's how you communicate, and that's how you deal with these kinds of issues. And you can retcon it in all sorts of different ways. What I really love to do is if you give a weapon, like let's say you give them a Holy Avenger, right, or like a +3 great sword at level 4, and you're like, oh shit, wow, they're really powerful now. Whoops, maybe you can help them out, right? It's like, all right, so we'll take two of the pluses off of that, but we'll give it some other cool feature, right? So you can work with them a little bit, and that's cool. That's fine. That's totally fine to retcon. Um, you can play that up as yes, you've been tuned to the weapon for so long, it has unlocked its new ability
Oh
at
yeah.
the cost of some of its damage. It is now, you can roll with that, and that's
Um,
totally fine.
and even if it's not the new ability at the cost of some damage, might feel a little bit funky. But you could also just, the weapon was afflicted by an ancient curse, and it's withering you away. I know that. What was your withering sword? That basically was just
Oh, famine. Oh.
famine,
Oh.
which was a brutally
Oh.
powerful sword that was slowly. Well, you just stopped aging and just started dying when you picked up the sword,
Yeah.
in a rough sense, right?
Yeah, basically. It was an item that the longer you became attuned to it, when you de-attuned to it, you would gain levels of exhaustion for each day that you were attuned.
Yeah.
So that was really bad. You wouldn't
So
want to
maybe
do that
not
because you
quite.
would just. Well, it also made you gaunt and look like you were dead,
Mm,
and not have to sleep or breathe or eat or drink or anything or taste anything ever. It was pretty bad. But putting a curse like that's another good way, like he was saying, of convincing a player maybe to back off a little.
yeah. Well, oh, you made the item too powerful. Well, of course, power
There's
always
a
comes at a
curse. Yeah.
price. Yes. Um, and these are all kind of easy ways. What about another
Oh, I
situation
I
which?
love. I'm sorry. I just want to say one more thing about
No,
that. I
go ahead.
love the curse where it's like it's nothing obvious that's happening until you wake up with blood all over yourself in the morning. You're like, what, what happened? Person on guard. Oh yeah, you just got up and walked away in the middle of the night. I don't know what's going on. Oh dear God, what did I do? This sword.
What have I done? Um, and then that also becomes a quest where now they're trying to either get you on a tune from the sword or lift whatever curse is upon the sword, or so on and so forth. There's definitely some storytelling opportunities there. They'll be
Yep.
really interesting and feel real within the kind of the confines of your world. Um, and then issues where the world and your characters are out of sync in terms of
Yeah.
their power level. That's something for you as a DM to fix by raising or lowering the power of the things that you throw at them in your encounters. That's one of those that falls into the category of not a mistake. You just
Yep.
adjust moving forward, and no one ever has to know about it.
Exactly. If something was just a little too powerful one time and it was, the brink of defeat, well, you know, make something a little weaker next time. Throw one fewer enemy at them, something like that. I always
Yes.
recommend starting with something really weak and then adding a little bit more until it's a really good challenge for them. Um, so that's all. Um, but yeah, that's not a mistake. Having a too tough encounter.
Yeah.
Um, Now there are some balance mistakes that are mistakes, and that would be having a too tough encounter without a way for the players to escape. If you, for example, lock them in a room with a gelatinous cube that's only 20 and the room's only 20 feet long, we might call that one a mistake.
Is this accusatory, Jeremy?
What? No, I was giving a hypothetical example.
Uh, I disagree. That encounter was perfectly balanced. Uh,
Sometimes you
but
make mistakes, is what
uh,
it comes down.
indeed,
And in a real environment, like in a real game, in a real campaign, I think there are a lot of easy ways to kind of retcon and make that. And we're going to talk about those right after we talk about our last kind of category,
our
which is
last. Well, go ahead, Jeremy. You're gonna do it.
okay, which is our more nuanced examples. Uh, every game is a little different. Every campaign has its own myriad of problems, and only you can really know what those are going to. Perhaps the tone is really drag of the game is really dragging your players down.
Hmm.
Perhaps the quest line that they're on is just not really working. Perhaps they're not really engaging with the lore of your world, or perhaps there are players that just are not working together well. They're clashing. That happens all the time, all of those things. And I'm not saying that those are necessarily mistakes. Um, for example, to have a setting where it has a very dark and dreary tone, that might wear on some players and really like bother them. Whereas um, for other players, it's great. I mean,
Yeah.
Curse of Strahd, it's one of the more popular modules in 5e. And I mean, going back forever, it's been a popular module, the Ravenloft module.
This is
And
true.
that is a dark setting. It's brutal. Um, so having that kind of thing, it's not wrong. It in itself isn't a mistake. But if you're running a game and you're seeing that it's wearing on people and people are talking, you're like, man, I just feel like shit. And you know that it's affecting you or your other players, not doing something about it is a mistake. Not doing something to change the tone and to lighten that is a mistake. Comic relief, I tend to find, is the easiest by far,
Hmm.
and it contrasts really well with the dark tone. But sometimes it's the opposite. You're going way too goofy, and your players want a more serious game. So we talk about more nuanced examples as this broad term because, well, very broad and it's
Your
very
game is your
specific.
game, and there are countless things, and these can be on an individual player level as well. Maybe you've done something that has like really just drained a particular player's enjoyment of the game. Maybe that cursed sword that you thought would be really fun has just sort of completely sucked the life out of the game. Who are having a really good time um, wielding around their really overpowered broken magic sword, and you'll have to think about, because again, there's no sort of magic cure all for this kind of stuff. You'll just need to think about how you can reconcile the enjoyment of both your group and all of the individuals in it.
Yep. I mean, that's basically all we can talk about with these more nuanced examples. Sometimes they'll require some, serious retcon to deal with, like if a situation that happens a lot again, if a player leaves the game,
Hmm.
whether it's because they're moving or they just don't want to play anymore or what have you, job change, any of that stuff can leave a player no longer in a campaign. And that falls under this nuanced example category, where sometimes you need to retcon a little and sometimes you don't. I think at this point we can kind of
Yeah,
talk
let's talk
about
about
the
retconning.
different types of retcons because those are important.
Yeah, and really, there's basically two kind of categories. There is the hard. I am just going to, fast change something in the world, completely remake it, and then whatever the consequences of that change would be, apply those into the world. For example, you know this king was never assassinated, and therefore the the results of that have changed. That would be a very hard and a very big retcon in a game. And then there's the softer retcon where you are changing things a little bit or kind of rushing around and moving things in a way that might be a little bit obvious, uh, but doesn't actually change the past. It's just very clear that you've acknowledged that you needed to change something and are sort of, shuffling things around to make it work a little bit more. And we're going to call that sort of a soft retcon in this case. But for starters, let's talk about that slam your fist into the ground. The world has done changed. That hard retcon. This is oftentimes not the best way to go. Um, you can usually find a way to reconcile and make things um, work in a little bit subtler ways without completely shattering the immersion and changing the way events have transpired in your campaign, but achieve kind of the same result that you want in changing the event. Um, Although I will say, as a caveat to this, if the change is very small and simple, for example, retconning things like, um, oh, this player isn't here today and they have an important item that we need to go to this other location. Like, oh, yes, he gave it to you before he left. Things like that are just healthy, and don't worry about kind of holding that much verisimilitude in order to just make the game work and make it fun.
On the other hand, though, being, when a player's like, oh, wow, the player couldn't show up, they just didn't show up, you don't know why. Being like, oh, yeah, their character dies in their sleep. Just like, what? that's a rude move.
Yeah, I have a personal home rule which I recommend that you apply to your own games. I highly recommend this rule: a player cannot die if they are not there.
I mean, that's I think that's a whole other conversation to be having.
It's just a Lion's House rule. Take it or leave it.
But back on like the retcons thing. So when you're doing the hard retcons, a lot of the times when this comes up, I'd say almost all the time hard retcons come up. 90+% is when you TPK, when you kill the whole party, or when you kill a lot of the party, like 1 or 2 or 3, God forbid, all of the characters. Right? Everybody dies. That's when a lot of the times DMs feel like they need to hard retcon. They need to come up with a solution of, oh, I didn't actually want these characters to die. Oh no, shit, what did I do? And there are a couple of ways you can handle it. So the first big way is just talking to your players, right? Honesty, saying, hey guys, I made a mistake. That encounter was too hard. I didn't want that to work like that. That was not supposed to kill you. That was not supposed to be a challenge. And I messed up. And that's one way to do it, right? And then you talk it through with your party, with your players, and you all kind of work it out. The players are probably a little ticked off that they just got, they feel like they just got cheated because you just told them that they got cheated.
That they got cheated, yeah.
And that doesn't work out super well a lot of the time, because it starts out with you as a DM coming with your hat in your hand saying, guys, I screwed y'all over. Sorry. And what's going to happen then? It's just like, okay, you screwed us all. Don't do that. Why'd you do that? And it's, well, you didn't mean to, but
I won't say to never do that. And there are times where I think you can do that.
Definitely.
But for something like a TPK, there are a lot kind of simpler solutions and soft retcons that you can make in order to make a TPK part of the story and act almost as if intended. And I think we talked about this a little bit when we're talking about TPKs, but I think one of the really obvious ones is, when they are killed, they all wake up imprisoned by whatever kind of foe beat them sometime later. And even if your players, and I think you'll have at least 1 or 2 skeptics in the party who are like, nah, there's no way that he planned for us to get beaten down and then captured. This was definitely just because we TPK'd, things have therefore changed. And you're going to get people that are going to think that, but there's enough plausible deniability there that as a DM, you can live in that gray area where they don't know whether or not that was it.
And here's the thing, when they ask you, you say nothing. It's like, I don't know. That's where you don't be honest. It's weird. when you're going straight up, you have to be honest. You have to, be frank. It's just being respectful of your other players. But when you're still the man behind the curtain, well, who knows? You could
Yeah.
have run, right? That's the best answer. Is well, you could have run, um,
Mm.
and I love that kind of stuff. So let's say you don't want players to be just kidnapped or captured, right? Because that can
Yes.
lead to some more stress and like, oh god, we have to get out. What are they going to do to us, right? Especially
Mhm.
if it's something bad like mind flayers. That's like, oh god, we're capturing mind flayers. Or if it's something bestial, right? Like just like
Yeah, something that
you're
would
walking
never
in
capture.
the Underdark and an Umber Hulk attacks you, and it's just well, that actually still works because even if it's a bestial creature, well, cool, something's controlling the beast. Done,
Yep.
easy. Umber Hulk in the Underdark, cool. Look in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Oh, look, Neogi. They're these cool, enslaving, mind-controlling Underdark spider things that are terrifying.
Good
Great.
pull on Neogi.
I know it because Crowley's used them
Oh, fair enough.
to control Umber Hulks to kick my ass. But that's a really great way to to roll that kind of stuff. I mean, mind flayers work great for that too. Um, no, don't pick a player at random to kill. I mean, you could. That'd be rude, but like you could. Um,
Oh,
Another one is
that
like
would feel so bad.
if
Oh,
you're in something like the Feywild, right? If you're in a whimsical place, um, dream sequence, right? That's a great soft retcon. It kind of falls somewhere between that hard and soft retcon, where it's like, oh, actually, you've just been in this illusion the entire time,
um,
right? And
and
by dying, that wakes you up, and you're like,
yes,
oh god, where have I been for my, what have we been doing for the last however time? Have we just been in this dream sequence the whole time? What's going on? How are we actually in the Feywild? That kind of stuff
yeah,
works out really well.
absolutely. And in that kind of dream sequence mode, and they die and wake up, you can also apply some sort of consequence, negative consequence to the like death in the dream. Like now they are, you know,
Yeah,
you know, have
madness
been
works
affected by some
easy.
kind of madness or curse or something along those lines to make it feel like yes, this was always the intention. It was a tough thing to see if you'd survive, and then by doing so, by failing to do so, you know,
You
incurred this
actually got out.
penalty. That feels very real. That feels very real, and like
Hmm.
something I could see any DM doing.
What's another great example? So we have like if you're in a whimsical kind of setting, and if you're against intelligent enemies, kind of deal. But let's talk about a different kind of situation, and that is like the NPC rescue because I see that a lot.
Mm,
The NPC rescue feels bad a lot of the time because a lot of time it doesn't feel plausible. You know what I mean, Pete?
absolutely.
Like the powerful wizard friend of yours coming out of nowhere to rescue.
Gandalf.
What is
Gandalf arrives
Gandalf doing
finally.
here?
And the way I think the best way to make something that like that work is not the kind of friendly rescue, because I definitely agree that I have a hard time believing when someone
Yeah,
coincidentally shows up right when you're losing, or right when you've been taken out to come save you. That's just very clear. But once you see the fight starting to go in a direction that isn't working for what's happening, you can throw a new factor into the fight that makes it more difficult for both sides. Maybe while you're fighting the mind flayers, the Neogis show up on their Umber Hulks and
yeah.
also enter into the fray. And now there's a three-person battle that's going on where the intention has been taken off you. The players have the opportunity to escape, and if they don't, well, then those things are still going to beat each other up and be easier to beat than they would have been on their own, just consciously trying to beat you up.
Another thing I really like is especially when something goes very wrong. The dramatic NPC sacrifice. Say you have your NPC with you; they're traveling with you, and
Mm.
one of your players would be struck by a lethal blow. That NPC jumps in front of the way. Your player lives, the NPC dies, and the players have a choice to run or not. It's dramatic, it's intense, and it feels okay in the moment. Because all the players are sad their NPC died, but they're happier that the NPC died than their friend player character died. So that's another important thing to weigh when you're doing that. Um, what's another? I had one just on the tip of my tongue that I'm just totally forgetting.
We can
We'll come back to
come
it if we
back
do.
and grab it once you remember it, which I've no doubt you will. Um, but as we've talked a little bit about kind of some of these hard retcons, and I think that
Oh, I remembered.
we'll take it away, Jeremy.
The preemptive retcon. This
Yes,
is a great one.
yeah,
Okay.
that's kind of what I was in. I was in line with that, with the like the NPCs showing up, like, oh no, that's not gonna be good.
Well, not even that, but one of the things I love to do in my games is I give my players a lot of magic items. They know that. Everyone who's played with me knows I give you way more magic items than I should. But that's just how I like to play. And generally those magic items are way too powerful. But one of the things I really love is I love to give the players a magic item that they have no idea what it does. They know it's very magical, but they don't know what it does. No, it is completely immune to any sort of detection from an identify spell or anything like that. Maybe
I've
they
had one of
found it in
these.
an ancient place. Maybe they were given it by a powerful NPC. And that magic item is literally whatever the fuck you need it to be when you need it to be something. Ta-da! You have preemptively solved any of your terrible, terrible problems by giving them a box that you say is magic. Have the magic box. What does it do? It's very magical. We'll keep it all the time. We must keep it with us forever. And great. Oh wow, the fourth player character falls and the magic box glows with divine power. The magic box! And suddenly all the players are back to life and they're running away and it's fun. You
Yeah,
know, and they
the very literal get out of jail free card. Um,
I highly recommend coming up with your own dumb magic box because
I I had one of those once in one of Jeremy's games. I loved it. I took it with me everywhere. It was the obsession of that game, was just me having this thing that I was told was a magic stick.
yep.
I adored it. That was the first time I ever played D&D, and it completely worked on me. I was
Oh
totally
yeah,
sold on the magic stick.
very important to do that. Great to do that for new players because especially with newer players that might screw up, right? That might do something really dumb because they don't know what they don't know what a beholder is until they walk up to a beholder and it disintegrates something.
Until they're dead.
And they're
Yeah,
like, ah! So it's important. I think it's really good for especially for newer players to do something like that. The preemptive retcon, so that you never have to retcon at all. It's just whatever get out of jail free card you need it to be.
absolutely.
I
Um,
love that kind of stuff.
so let's talk about a situation in which you have looked at every angle and there is just no way out of the situation that you're in. There's no retcon other than just a very direct hard retcon of like, hey guys, I done messed up. Uh, that's fine. If that happens, then that happens, and it probably will. Every once in a while, you're going to be too have fucked up too bad to actually do anything about it. And when that happens, one of I think the most important things is just actually forgetting everything we said about kind of being sneaky and just own up to it and be honest with your players. Once you've realized that there's no other way, you got to go whole hog in that direction and just say, "Hey guys, I'm sorry, I messed up. I don't know what we're going to do about it. We might have to just go back and kind of replay the session from the last time that we're playing it, and just that event didn't happen, or we might just have to, you know, magic away some of the negative effects. Someone comes and shows up and brings you back to life, and or whatever the problem ends up being. But it's definitely bad if you try and do something like this that's going to be really obvious and really transparent that you are just fixing a mistake. If you're making a hard
Yeah.
retcon and you don't tell the players that that's what you're doing, because they're just going to be confused, and they're going to lose a lot of the kind of, they're going to stop suspending disbelief in your world. And it's okay sometimes to just say, hey, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, let's all fix this together. Try not to if you can avoid it, but if you can't, just own it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the hard retcon is usually not what you want to do. You can, but it's usually not. These soft retcons though are great.
Oh
They're
yeah.
totally fine. There's nothing wrong with them. People demonize the word retcon in the context of D&D, but you shouldn't because it's just another tool in your DM toolbox to make sure that you're doing your job. And your job is Make everyone have fun. That's 4 words. That's it. That's all that's important. Um, yeah.
Yeah,
One of the things I really actually like with the TPK is when
they
everyone
get
dies,
bored
right?
in
And they're
there.
like, all our characters are all dead, and everyone's all sad, right? Are all upset, and they're like, oh my god, we'll never defeat the big bad, whatever. One of the things that you can totally do, and I don't see this had done too often, but I have seen it done before, is just have it be like, have say, yeah, all right, and you wake up. And but we died. He failed death saving throws. He was decapitated by a death knight. Yeah, you wake up in the burned out remains of wherever you were fighting that death knight with your cleric NPC friend or a some sort of cleric standing over you having just revived, right? Especially if there's a big bad. Usually there's a big good that's fighting the big bad, and there are forces associated with that that kind of are invested in seeing you live because you're the ones that want to fight the big bad. So them coming in like allies coming in resurrecting the party later is a thing that can happen,
Mhm.
especially if they aren't in like a
Yeah, the
too
higher
bad
the
spot.
level, yeah.
Yeah, I mean like if they're in the middle of, oh Pete, your webcam crapped out again.
Oh
If
dear.
they're out like in the middle of the mountains somewhere, that's a very, very different story than if they're um, in like a town.
Hmm.
But if they're in a town, it's super easy to bring them back. If they're out elsewhere, that's a different story.
Absolutely. Um, and also you'll notice Jeremy kind of doing his DM voice, and that's another just great DM trick that he has shown off there, where he did the "you wake up" and then they go "what?" and then I go, "Yeah, you wake up," and that kind
Yep.
of like tone that's like, "Oh, what mystery is at play?" Um, that's a great trick to just
It,
do that kind of hard retcon and then just pretend like, yeah, there is something odd about this, and you have as long as you need in order to figure out what that is.
yeah, having the right tone when you say that kind of stuff really helps to make it feel like a lot more like you're seriously, you planned for this. You knew this was going
Mhm.
to happen. You, in your dungeon masterly wisdom, foresaw the potential demise and had a plan. And even
Mhm.
if you just pulled that plan out of the ether, if you say it in the right way and you're confident with how you act, you're all good because they're all the players are there to play in this great story together, to help contribute their part, their character, their choices, right, and ultimately to write this story that you're all making together. Um, and so, being making it feel like it's all part of the grand scheme, right? That's the way to go. And if
That's your
players
job.
ask you, if they ask you, "Did
Was
you
that part
plan
of
to
the
kill
writing?
us there?" You don't say yes. You say, "I was ready for it.
Yeah. Um,
I wasn't hoping you'd die."
the snarky I don't know, the
Shrug emoji.
yes, as Jeremy would be apt to say. But one more thing I'd like to talk about before we kind of wrap up this talk is I think players have a role in this as well. And
Mm.
as a player, if you're playing and you're not having fun for some reason, it's sort of your responsibility, even because the GM has a lot going on. They have so much more that they have to do than the players. And if your fun has been hampered in some way, or you believe that the GM has made a mistake that's really having a significant negative impact on the game, you can tell the GM that. You talk to them about it and let them know that whatever they're doing is impacting your or maybe the whole group's fun. And that's kind of conversation, because as a GM, I think as a GM, you're a showman, and all showmen dislike criticism. So it's easy as a GM to kind of like instantly react on that stuff. And one of the things I'd say as a player is, if you're going to point out that the GM is fucked up, make sure that you are respectful in the way that you do
Yeah.
so. Speak to them very kind of, frankly, keep in mind kind of the feelings, because you're always kind of, as a GM, putting yourself out there. And there's nothing that can feel worse than having someone that's been playing with you come up to you and just say, hey, I really hate the way that you've been running this game, and I don't want to, be a part of it if it's going to keep going like this anymore. And that can be crushing.
Oh, there we go. Wait a second. Interrupting. Keyword. If you, as a player, give an ultimatum to your GM, shame on you.
Yes.
You can criticize. You can ask for things to work differently. But if you say, do this or else, that is not a working relationship.
There's a special place.
Yeah, everyone does that from time to time. Everyone fucks up. But really try to make sure that you're not being that guy. I've been that guy before. I regret having been that guy before. And, that's the key. You learn from your mistakes and you try not to do it anymore.
Yeah, and it's very important to keep an open dialogue between the GM and your players. And like I said, the GM's got a lot going on. They won't always catch everything that they're screwing up, and let them know. But again, just be polite about it and understand that everyone's trying their best usually. Unless the issue that the problem is that they're not trying their best, in which case that's a whole nother issue.
It's a different discussion.
That's not a mistake. That's a different thing.
I wanted to point something out because I saw something in chat that I wanted to point out. So Shiba, first suggestion, have them just resurrected decades later when the big bad conquered the world and changed the campaign completely. That's a great way to roll with it. To, just take the story in a different direction. I love that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
However, I don't like the next thing that you mentioned. Scripted death, yeah, that fight was obviously too hard. Ooh, that's not something you want to say as a DM. You never want to tell them you planned to kill them, because that is a dick move. Yeah. You do not want to.
Playing?
Yeah. In Dungeons and Dragons, and in most tabletop role-playing games, collaborative storytelling experiences, you really want to you want the game to feel like the story is their own. Their choices are really meaningful, and it could go either way based on how they play, what choices they make, and what they do. Like, that all really matters. Telling them you scripted them to die is a bad feel. That makes them feel like they don't have that power as players. So I would recommend never saying that. Even if you did, I would recommend not saying it. You can say, I expected it was going to be really hard, and I was ready for the reality that you guys might die. That's a lot different than saying, yeah, I plan to kill you all here. One of those really feels bad from a player perspective. Whereas the other one is like, damn, we could have played that better. We could have done it differently. Maybe we should have run.
And every game is different, but while we're on the subject, also probably don't plan to do that if you can avoid it. That's generally just kind of a bad way to think that you need them to die and you need them to go in a certain way in a certain situation.
There are exceptions to everything, but I'm agree with you almost
on the whole. Yeah.
Try
and come up with a way that's optional.
I killed all my characters in a dream, and now they have to deal with the death curse in Chelt.
Anyway, that's a whole other thing.
Sheba's actually asking, okay, how do you handle bringing in a set of new characters and using those characters to save the old characters? I don't know how I do that because I've never done that before. I like it. I think that's cool. Who do you play when they're saved? Well, Sheba,
both.
This is an interesting choice.
Characters. I have
there's an
answer. That's the answer.
Yep. Everyone can play two characters if you're into that, and everyone is into that. And then their characters can romance each other, and then it's just weird. I hate when players make my NPCs talk to each other. Just, oh, you son of a bitch! Why would you make me do that? That's what I would absolutely do to punish my players for doing that.
I love it.
Like, oh, you want to play two characters, huh? That's fine.
I like the challenge. I like to try and flex when it comes up.
I like Farful's suggestion. Yeah. I would run them through an NPC rescue where they only play as established NPCs. I think that's a really cool idea. Plus that really would get the players to really connect with some of the NPCs a little bit more. I dig that a lot. My cat's very excited because Jamie just got.
Also, I want to point out a thing that Shiba said a little while ago because I thought it was absolutely delightful about your magic box, which was, here, have a magic box. Years later, the party reaches the BBEG. How the hell did you get my phylactery? It's a really, it's a really good one.
That is a damn good one. I like that a lot.
So Jeremy, I don't know about you, but I don't really have much else to say on the subject of fixing mistakes. Do you want to, unless people have other things they want to talk about, do you want to wrap up a couple minutes early here? Because I think we've covered our bases. Not too crazy big.
Yeah, not a ton to talk about on this one, but I think really important stuff to talk about. This is, I think, the number. It's up there. Is one of like the biggest things that newer DMs do wrong. Is they overthink it or they just don't know how to go about it. So hopefully this has been helpful for some of you guys.
Yeah,
it's always helpful for Pete and I to go back over the basics.
Yeah,
never too
I've
late
learned
to go back
a
to the
lot
basics.
from DnDTime Talks myself in just thinking about it for the couple of weeks before each talker. So
absolutely. And as just kind of a last kind of spiel, Pete, if you don't mind, I'll handle it today.
End reels, yeah, please.
Alrighty. Friday is Pete and Jeremy's D&D time. 3 1-hour adventures featuring you. That's right,
and
you. Well, not you.
You are uninvited.
But yeah, it's 3 1-hour adventures. Super fun, crazy, goofy, whimsical, fantastical. Check out our website, dndtime.stream, and our Discord server. You can find links below for everything. It's really neat. It's a ton of fun. And yeah, sign up now for tomorrow's game or for Friday's game. And then, yeah, do that and play with us. Pretty please? That's all I got.
Yeah.
Oh, Sunday.
And then take it away.
On Sunday, Pete and I are going to be doing DnDTime Brews, a fun show where we sit down and create some cool, high-quality homebrew content for Pete and Jer's D&D time.
We just get really turned up. We get really turned up and party.
Yeah, we get really drunk on the streamer machine.
We get
no, we don't.
Really swifty. No, we do not. Actually,
I am probably the closest to getting swifty, but I have a single drink, and that usually is too much because I'm a baby. But anywho, man, Data, you're really mad. He's really upset, guys. I'm sorry. But yeah, come on down.
We had talked about this last time because we said TBD for the topic, but last time we were talking about maybe doing some races brainstorming.
Yeah, I would love to jump back and look at a bunch of the races. We actually have a huge brainstormed list already, and maybe we'll try and start digging through a couple of those. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I kept thinking like, man, we have so many homebrew races, but we really don't. We only have like 3.
Yeah, we got 3.
Really not that many.
Yeah,
so we're gonna dig through a couple of those. Should be
there's
really
always
cool.
I was gonna say there's always the question for us when we do D&D-Time Brews is we don't want to like overpopulate.
You don't want to flood it.
D&D time with too many things, but another race. I think we're ready. We're ready for another one.
Yeah, and I have another interesting non-D&D time thought for brews, but I'll talk to you about that in private, Pete. As a kind of longer term project. But without further ado, I think that's it for the evening. Thank you all for watching. We love you guys. Hello, Matthias the Enchanter. Hello, Roger Twy. I saw you earlier.
Here in these final moments.
Yes, you're too little, too late. Don't forget to sign up for D&D time.
Yes, thank you all very much for tuning in. Y'all are the best. And I'm Pete.
And I'm Jeremy. And this is D&D Time Talks.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.